Hello, and welcome to today's Decision Education Foundation online event. It is so exciting to have you all here and a wonderful feeling to be a part of this community that values decision skills in the face of the many challenges that we face today. Decision Education Foundation, also known as DEF, was founded in 2001 with the mission to improve the lives of young people by empowering them with effective decision skills that enhance their prospects for better lives in today's challenging and uncertain world. Before going on about DEF, let me first introduce myself. I'm Jayla Narsoy, and I will be your host for this event. I'm a former DEF student from way back in 2014 when Chris Spetzler, the executive director of DEF, was lecturing in Stanford Summer School. I'm a graduate of UC Berkeley, where I studied psychology and minored in human rights and theater. I'm currently working as a DEF intern while simultaneously pursuing a journalism career in the States, as well as my hometown, Turkey. What I learned at the Decision Skills course at Stanford Summer School has truly remained important in my life, helped increase my confidence, and have a better understanding of and a capacity to deal with uncertainty, which we so dearly need in this time. It's something I wish everyone had the opportunity to experience. Now, let's get to why we're all here. Today's event will focus on how decision education makes a difference in the lives of different communities. We will be hearing from students, teachers, counselors, administrators, parents, and volunteers. First, with the help of some other former students, we will go over some basics of what many DEF students like me learned in decision quality and method. Let's check out the content we developed as DEF Advanced this year. Here are great pieces by Ben, Isabella, and me.
So decision education, that is absolutely invaluable. It's something we do on a day-to-day basis. Having this decision chain, having this framework for thinking about the decisions I'm making, absolutely gives you clarity. It's invaluable. You see this? Clarity. That's what decision education gives you. It gives you clarity on all these different things, on how do you assess your situation. The most important thing are the values. What's going to matter to you most long-term. You have to look realistically at what options you have to get towards that long-term vision that you have for yourself. And you need to know how to go grab that information from, whether it's your environment, online education, figuring out yourself, or just your peers, whatever it is that you need to do. You got to figure out, okay, what's going to give me a strong basis for making this decision, the reasoning behind why I'm going to make that decision. And at the end of the day, you have to go full pot committed on it, or else you'll never figure out if the decision was worth it. So clarity, that's what decision education gives you.
Like me, Ben was a student in a Stanford pre-collegiate course who kept in touch with DEF. In a separate video, Ben shares his decision to become an entrepreneur full-time, focusing on building a startup with his brother and stepping away from University of Oregon. Students learn a lot about Ben's values and have an opportunity to experience the challenging decisions faced by college students, such as setting priorities and time management. A lot of high school students feel pressure to win the college acceptance competition at all costs, becoming stressed out and overscheduled as a result. In one decision scenario, Isabella shares a decision analysis she did around which extracurricular activity to drop. She realized she couldn't do it all. Her final choice was to drop crew, a tough call. Isabella credits the decision skills she learned with helping her. First, to convince her parents it was the right thing to do. They weren't so hot on the idea. Second, to communicate with her teammates and not lose them. That had happened to others before. And third, to create a hybrid alternative to still row with the team recreationally on the weekends. Isabella also shared the following decision scenario, even bigger, more personal, and again, decision analysis made a difference.
Shortly after I decided to quit crew, my dad told me that he and my stepmother were going to move to Atlanta. I had the choice to stay in California, move to Atlanta with my parents, or go to boarding school. That was a difficult choice. But again, the most important factor in making the decision was not asking, do I want to go to boarding school or not? The question I was asking was, what high school experience do I want to have? Faced with this decision, I applied the same process that I used in my crew decision. I looked at what information was available to me. What boarding schools could I go to? What was my trajectory like if I had stayed at the high school I was at in California? I looked at my alternatives. Could I somehow split my time 50-50 across the country? Most importantly, I looked at my values. Did I want to expand my worldview and move to a new place, maybe get ahead of the curve and go to boarding school? Or did I want to really dig into my home experience in the last 4 years in Marin? Initially, I decided that I wanted to move to Atlanta. I was curious about what the East Coast had to offer, and I'd heard that Atlanta was an up-and-coming place. But the trouble was my commitment to follow through was not strong. When I actually had to tell my mother that I wanted to move to Atlanta, I reneged on the decision. My reasoning wasn't sound, probably because my values were not aligning with what I wanted to do. I reevaluated my choices and zeroed in on what made me anxious about moving to Atlanta. The truth was, I was happy in Marin. I had found communities and activities that made me feel fulfilled and didn't want to upset something that was going really well. I decided to stay.
So now you had a second pass around the decision chain, a key organizing framework in DEF's curriculum. You've also seen how we put into use with students with these new videos that incorporate DEF tools and concepts. In Ben's case, you saw him holding the Conversations for Clarity tool, something you'll learn more about later in the program. In Isabella's case, there was the iterative process of strengthening the weakest decision chain links after a first pass analysis, along with needing to balance head and heart to come to a better conclusion. Finally, I'm excited to share a story of some of the value decision skills created in my life.
I was in 10th grade in high school, and I came to Stanford for a summer course in decision making, which I thought was really necessary to my life because I've always had difficulties with making decisions. And Chris and I recently were talking about one of our first conversations that we had in Stanford. And I went up to Chris. I remember this very clearly. We were passing by the cafeteria, and I went up to Chris and I was like, Chris, I'm in desperate need of your help with decision making because I have so much anxiety when it comes to making decisions, even when it comes to simple things like ordering my food at the restaurant. And then Chris just gave me this anecdote of how important is that food going to be in the large spectrum of things in your life. And I was like, not really that big. It's probably pretty minuscule. And then Chris was like, you should keep that in mind when you're getting this anxiety from ordering your food at the restaurant. This is just going to be a simple decision that's not necessarily going to change the larger trajectory of your life. And that really stayed with me because that really took away, as I went on to make really big decisions, I noticed the gravity that comes with big decisions and the lack of anxiety that should come with smaller decisions like that.
My work with DEF is a good example of the recent initiatives DEF has been undertaking. DEF has been advancing its work in the media to provide mentorship to young audiences through contemporary outlets. We have been developing video content in partnership with young DEF volunteers to capture their decision experiences and to increase our reach to them through utilizing new media. Next, we're going to transition to DEF's work with schools and hear from educators who are helping create and deliver materials to students. Some exciting new work has been occurring at Junction City High School in Oregon, a longtime DEF partner. This next short piece introduces the recent work there from a variety of perspectives.
Well, Decision Education Foundation has been instrumental in really helping us connect our ninth graders to high school. Even before the school year begins, we hold a Bridge Week in August, and we connect our kids with peer mentors and with some of our staff. And Decision Education's helped us through that process, as well as a new class in 2019-20. We had a class called Ninth Grade Success, and DEF was extremely helpful in helping us plan and organize that class, train our teachers, really make sure that it was successful from the get-go, that our teachers felt confident coming in to the school year. And it was just a great partnership throughout this school year, and we look forward to what's to come.
It's changed my thinking, and I think I've been doing it for a few years now, and I'm able to approach tons of different situations with the DEF frame of thought. And I'm always thinking about values, and when we're looking at decisions, I use the DEF stuff at home with my friends. and even at school and working with the kids and curriculum. And I just think it crosses so many borders. You can use it in all aspects.
I feel like I'm still gonna struggle with uncertainty because I'm not always gonna just pull out a paper and write down the chain. First, that's pretty obvious, but I do know that it helps me think of other ways, not just resorting to being sad about stuff or being really confused and frazzled. I always kind of have a way to do it. And I feel like the class kind of changed the way I think about making decisions because it's not always just spontaneous.
Anytime we can give students more tools and skills to navigate what's a pretty tough age, I think certainly reduces anxiety that they have and decisions that they have to make. High school is not an easy period of time, and certainly the foundation or the skill set that we're providing them as 14, 15-year-olds is really going to pay dividends down the line, making decisions with confidence.
Now, here to share more about some of the great things going on in Oregon, it is my pleasure to introduce Liz Henderson, an innovative teacher and champion of decision education at Junction City High School in Oregon.
Good morning. I'm Liz Henderson in Junction City, and I'm just going to share with you guys a little bit about what we're doing out in Junction City and what we've been doing, and our partnership with DEF. So we started with DEF, working with them with the Strong Start program, and we've been offering the Strong Start program to our students for 5 years. It started out called the Summer Bridge. We still call it that and was referred to in the video. And we started with just about 20 students who we were kind of pulling into the program, and now we had over 60 enroll this year, and that was in a COVID year. So that was a really big deal to have all those kids sign up to spend a week of their summer learning how to be more successful in high school. We've transitioned this year and we started offering them a quarter credit for their work. And that just incentivizes it that much more, but it also shows how much we value the curriculum that we're providing to kids over this week. They do a lot of games. As you can see, all these pictures are from Strong Start over the years. And the picture on the right is from not this past summer, but 2019's crew, when we had over 40 students, and our senior mentors are there in the picture with them. And they just spend a week getting to know each other, getting to know themselves, and getting to know the decision chain so that they enter high school ready to face some of the decisions, or more ready to face some of the decisions they'll have. And yes, it's a week of their summer, but they all overwhelmingly enjoy it and feel more confident stepping into high school. After I started working with DEF through the Strong Start program, I realized how amazing the curriculum was and how much I wanted to be able to use it in my everyday classroom. But when we were working with 20 to 40 kids over the summer, once I got into my classroom, I'd only have 2 or 3 in my assigned class that knew the vocabulary. So I really worked with Chris and my administrators to bring the curriculum into what we call our team class, which is our advisory homeroom period, and team meets once a week and for all 4 years. So in 2017, we began incorporating the DEF material into the curriculum for all of our high school students in that team class. So once a week when they met with their team teacher, they would receive DEF lessons, and we incorporated the chain and the basics of understanding that foundation. And then we started working it into lesson plans that we already were doing. We already were working with kids to choose classes, to choose post-high school decisions on their life. We were already working with them to research their career choices. And so how can we fit the DEF framework and give them those tools to make those decisions in a better way? 9th and 10th grade lays that foundation and really teaches them the vocabulary. They work through case studies like you saw at the beginning of the video. And then in 11th and 12th grade, we really put the foundation to work and apply it to their lives. And this is just one of the worksheets that the kids work through. So the HIP idea is a DEF curriculum, and we continue to adapt the curriculum to what is relevant to the students and to their lives. So last year in our school, we had huge issues with vaping. It was a really big problem across our school. So we adapted, okay, guys, let's apply this DEF curriculum to those decisions that you're seeing every single day in your life. And then we always allow kids to really look at their own decisions. So what are you facing right now? What are you trying to figure out? And how can we look at that through the DEF lens? After we saw that this was working in team, but kind of slowly, I was working with my administration to look at ninth grade on track numbers. And we came up with the idea to incorporate DEF into a class that all ninth grade students are required to take for the first trimester of high school. And the school administration was really looking for a way to help the on-track percentages for ninth graders in our school and how many credits they were earning during that ninth grade year. We were seeing that they were really struggling. And so what can we offer them in a class? And we started it last year. It's taught by the student's team teacher. So this is a teacher they'll see all 4 years of high school. But previously, before this class, you only saw that teacher once a week for all 4 years. Starting last year, students start with their team teacher and they see them every single day for the first trimester of their high school career. And we had teachers that said by the end of that first trimester, the relationships they had with their students were equal to the relationships they'd had by junior year with their past group. So they were able to excel those student relationships fourfold. They were able to reach those junior levels within the student's freshman year. We worked together with DEF to form our goals, and the course curricular goals are for students to work on their personal best, their academic success, and their career exploration, and it's all built on a DEF foundation. So we're all using the DEF vocabulary, and how do we make the best decisions for ourselves when we're trying to reach those. We have weekly check-ins with the students through Google Forms, and those provide us with tons of data that then is shared out. So I'm able to analyze the data. We do emotional check-ins. We ask kids how connected they are with the school, how connected they are at home, what they need. And then I share that information with our counselors. And our counselors are able to reach out immediately to students who seem to be suffering emotionally, who aren't connected, and help them come into the school more. And that's been even more important this year with COVID. While we have these kids on the other side of a screen and we're able to see who needs that help, and our counselors are able to reach out to them at home, call them in, do an individual Zoom. And we built in 60 minutes a week for study skills and homework to help those students. And then we're also doing targeted academic interventions. So when progress report comes out, we start with, okay, everyone who's struggling in math class, we'll pull you in on a given day and really work on raising those grades. These are some pictures from our success class last year. We got all students, all ninth graders from our school went to a college campus for a tour. We do live in Oregon, so that's the upper right-hand corner, and it was pouring down rain, but we're used to it. So we weathered the storm and kids got to step foot on a college campus and really think about where they were going. The middle picture there is one of our teachers giving the graduation pledge. So he took all the students out to where our graduations actually held and talked to them about how in 4 years we want to see them there and we want them to pledge to get there as graduates. Lower left-hand corner is a very successful business lady, and she is in charge of the Springfield Chamber of Commerce. She's a Junction City High School graduate, and she came and spoke with students and had some experience to share with them about how she struggled as a young student at Junction City and has been successful in the decisions she made to get there. And then we did a lot of fun activities to help the kids learn about the decisions they're making. And this summer, we were looking at our schedule around COVID and we realized we had some room. And so we created our 10th grade seminar. It's the addition to 9th grade success. We spent all summer making improvements and adjustments to both the 9th grade curriculum and then expanding that into the 10th grade year. So students are remaining with their team teacher. They're spending the first period of every day with that team teacher again. For 9th graders, we included more decision case studies that came from what the teachers said they wanted last year. So the Ben story that we just heard, the Jalen story, the Isabella, we're putting those all into the curriculum. The kids are looking at them and working through the chain. More repetition with the DEF material. And we shifted our study time, which used to be spread out throughout the week, to 1 day a week, so we could really help those kids more. In 10th grade, they're expanding their DEF stuff to more college and career exploration, returning to some of these case studies. The case studies were new this summer, a couple of them, so we put those into 10th grade as well. And we're working on increased goal setting work for those guys. And one of my kiddos here, one of my good success stories, these are my team kids. And I started with them as they were my summer bridge kids on the left there, little 9th graders. And they came to me largely by recommendation of the middle school counselor. So these were kids they really thought might struggle in high school. And I worked with them in that summer bridge program before they entered high school. And I've kept them as my team kids. And I've taught them DEF throughout the whole line. On the right is our picture from last year. And we continue to grow. And I have kids from all realms. I have a kid in this group who lives with grandparents and grew up homeless. I have kids in here on IEP and SPED programs. I have kids in here who are struggled with dropout. And some of my biggest success stories is one of my students named Manny, who I've worked with again and again. And I think Manny's a great DEF story because Manny continues to make bad decisions, but he continues to work with me to reflect on those and make a better decision next time. And I think that's really huge. As a sophomore, he was failing like 3 classes. So I worked with him to make a decision to drop one of those classes so we could focus on raising his grades in the other one and to really focus on his value of playing football. And he was able to raise those grades and become eligible to play football in the fall. After football season, he started to slip again. This summer, we had another meeting with him, me and our school counselor, and we really talked to him about, Manny, what do you value? And at this point in his career, he's really where we would put normal kids towards a GED path, but he really values a diploma. So we're continuing to work with him. He just finished a class at the midterm point in this term. So we're going to get him another class and accelerate his credits. And hopefully we'll get him to continue focusing and making those better decisions that will keep him on the point to a diploma. And one of my other greatest stories is a girl named Shelby who has been working. She's from a pretty low income family and she really wants to go to college and she's interested in the medical field. So this summer when COVID hit, all of our students had to make a pretty big decision, which was to transfer their education online or to continue with the remote learning through teachers. And Shelby's family initially chose online, but I wasn't sure that was the best path for her, knowing what she was interested in. So I asked her and her parents to come meet with me and we pulled out the chain work and we looked at it. And it turned out they were missing a lot of useful information about what they would be offered online versus in building. And so we talked about that. I shared that information with them. We returned to Shelby's values. What are you really interested in? And she really wanted her medical certificate and she could only get that through the remote learning and not our full online program. So I gave Shelby all these tools and then I sent her home. I said, you're not in a great decision state, are you? And she's like, no, I'm very overwhelmed. And I said, go home, think about it, and let me know. And so then she got back to me with her decision, but we were able to talk about all that and work through it because she's aware of the vocabulary. She's worked on it for 3 years now. and she was able to make what I think is a really great decision for her. On top of my work in the classroom, like I mentioned in the video you saw, I've been using this at my home. I used it with a really good friend who was trying to decide if she should move back to Oregon from San Francisco area a couple years ago. And I was with a group of friends when we made that decision. Well, we didn't make the decision, but we worked it through. We built a weight and rate chart, which is one of the tools DEF uses. And we talked about, should she move home or should she stay down there where she was making more income, had more job opportunities? And we worked through that, and I kind of forgot about it. And 2 years later, I had one of the friends who had been there text me and say, hey, how do I get access to that decision-making stuff? My grandmother is actually not doing well, and my family is really struggling with how we make these end-of-life decisions. And should we put her on hospice? Should we continue to seek care? And that was a really big decision. And she knew that they needed more help and tools. And so she reached out to me and was looking for those tools that I was able to provide her. So that's how it goes outside of the classroom, and I'm able to use it in my real life as well. So those are just some of the ways that DEF has impacted my life, and I've been able to use it to impact the lives of others around me. And now I'm going to pass it off to Carrie Brumbach, who works in the Redmond School District over the mountain from me. And she's going to share a little bit about how she's been using the DEF program.
Thank you, Liz. That is some really great work. I don't know if you caught all of that, but Liz and those folks in Junction City are really making a difference in students' lives using the decision education curriculum. Just a little bit about my background. I started with Decision Education Foundation in 2015 with the Summer Bridge program, as it was called then, in Elmira, Oregon, working at Elmira High School with our incoming freshmen. I did that for 2 years in the summer and then made a transition to Central Oregon at Redmond School District. But I still continue to help other educators bring decision education into their districts and into their buildings after I had left Elmira High School. Since I've been in Redmond since 2017, I've worked with our local 9th grade bridge program. We call it Camp 9. And I've included vocabulary and curriculum in some of the videos that the Decision Education Foundation has created for decision quality and decision skills. I have been teaching this will be my 13th year. I am married happily for 13 years and have 2 wonderful children, 8 and 10 years old. And I can tell you that over the course of the last 5 years with DEF, I know personally and as an educator that decision education and decision quality is not limited to the classroom. I realized this very early on. I think that as educators, and if I have educators here in the attendance other than our panelists, we know that there are gimmicks in education that our districts adopt very temporarily to spark interest and spark student engagement for a short term. Sometimes we can be fortunate enough to have things be long lasting and continue that education within our districts, but sometimes we just end up moving on to the next best thing. And I think one of the things that's important to mention about decision education and decision skills is that it's not gimmicky. This is not something that we just adopt temporarily in the short term and drop later on because something new and innovative has come up. Decision skills and decision quality is something that is timeless. It is ageless as well. This is something that our students, our staff, our school boards, parents, anybody within the realm of making decisions, which is all of us, we can all benefit from decision education, decision quality and decision skills. To give you an idea, the work at Junction City is amazing because it deals with students on an academic level, right? And on a very personal level. And we can extend that into not only decisions that students are making in the classroom and at school, but we can also extend that to those really hard decisions that students are making on a social level, on a personal level. We can give them the skills within decision education, and they can take that into peer pressure moments, or moments of anxiety around decisions about the future, moments about stress and anxiety. Right now, there's a lot of conversations all over the nation about social emotional learning because our students are at home in remote learning and they're struggling. Those who have had decision education background and those who have gotten those skills have a little bit of a leg up navigating those really hard and tough decisions that we're dealing with in this environment that we find ourselves in education and in our personal lives. Through the years, I've helped kids navigate extreme peer pressure and stressful situations. I've helped kids navigate academics versus sports using all of these decision education skills. I've helped students navigate conversations with parents, conversations with their teachers, with best friends, with other family members and relatives. Again, I think Liz made a really good statement about decision education, it's borderless. We can extend this out of the classroom into our homes and into our jobs and into our personal lives. And I think that's really important. My husband, unfortunately, was diagnosed with leukemia at the end of February of this year, right before COVID hit. 2 days later, there was a COVID outbreak in the United States. And we were dealing not only with, he and I are both educators, not only with the situation of my husband no longer being able to teach and dealing with a life-threatening disease, but also dealing with our children being pushed out of their educational homes and into our home for remote learning, while also dealing with a father who now has a potentially life-threatening cancer. So we had a lot of decisions to make, a lot of health decisions, a lot of decisions regarding our own children's education, a lot of decisions about ourselves as educators in this climate. And those are extremely emotional and heart-focused questions, right? Those are the things that really tug on our heartstrings. And the great thing about decision education, and it may seem a little bit I don't know, interesting to bring it up in a situation where you're talking about cancer and COVID, but one of the
I guess everybody else has had that go down.
little bit of peace of mind, especially when it's really hard to determine, what are we going to do with our future? And in addition to that, conversations that you have after you get decision education and after you've experienced gaining those skills, that vocabulary and language, as Liz has stated too, follows you. It follows you into familial conversations. And your family members start asking, that is really interesting, the way that you're talking about a decision. Tell me more about that. That sounds like something that would help in my life. And this is a pop culture kind of a thing, but when we're working with students, this decision education and decision skills and decision quality really become parts of life hacks. Like I'm really struggling with a decision and I'm just going to make it spontaneously and hope that the roll of the dice comes out well in the end. But what this does is gives you kind of a little set of life hacks to work with, to understand your decision, to realize that there could be creative alternatives, to look for more information. Should these be life hacks? I think we all realize that there's a process in decision making, but if we put a name and a language to it and help students with those steps, it becomes some really amazing tools that our students use. And that really has been my experience in the last 5 years. When I said that decision education is ageless, we're trying to bring this decision language into our 6th grade. There's a huge transition that happens between 5th and 6th grade in our district at least. And we have a 6th grade launch program that helps students navigate middle school in preparation for what's to come. And our decision education tools are fitting into that in a way that is helping those younger kids also understand decisions. So It's timeless, it's ageless, it's not a gimmick. It's something that we can definitely see long-term benefit from, as Liz has demonstrated. And other presenters today, our panelists, are also going to mention ways that this has become a long-term language and a long-term route of education in their schools and in their lives as well. So that's what decision education is. You know, we're working at an academic level, but it spreads and it doesn't have borders, and it is timeless and ageless, and it's truly tools that all of us really can use in our future and to make those choices that really affect our life's trajectory. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you guys to tell you about my experiences with DEF. I think it's grown over the years. I think in the development process, we've seen some amazing changes and amazing adaptations. We have some amazing stories that are anecdotal and also really relevant to today's environment, today's culture, today's educational arena. And I implore you to check it out if you haven't already, and really consider this fit in your life and in your child's education, in students that you may teach, their education, and if you're an administrator, definitely in theirs. It's benefiting the future of our students. It really is. I'd also like to mention before I pass this on today that the presentation today is being recorded. It will be available to our attendees in the next week or so. So don't be worried if you had to take a step out or if you missed part of this. It's definitely going to be available later on. So no worries there. And I apologize if I had lost connection at some point. So again, I'm so excited you guys are here to learn about decision education and decision skills. For our next presenter today, I'm so honored to introduce Amy Straneri, a counselor at Thurston High School in Springfield, Oregon, to share more of the information and effect VEF has had in her life. So on to you, Amy.
Great, thanks, Carrie. Yeah, I feel lucky to share a little bit about the work I've got to do with Decision Education Foundation and just decision quality in general. I've been a counselor now, well, it's always scary when you start losing count, so it's about 26 years, but I've really been at the high school for the last 19, and it was about 10 years ago that I got connected in with Chris and at DEF and got the training. And so it was definitely an immediate tool I could use in my office with students of helping them make the decisions that they were facing. And so that was really awesome for me, always looking for quicker tools to be in using when I'm talking to students. You know, it's hard as a high school counselor because you only get brief moments with students, maybe 15, 20 minutes, because they need to be in class, they need to be learning. And so the ability to use the chain, and you could really focus in on what was going on with them. Was it a framing issue? Were they not figuring out creative alternatives? What was going on for them was really an awesome tool to help my language with them, to help kind of find clarity to move on. And the little hack that, as Carrie was talking, was not for the kids, it was actually for me, is I put that poster, maybe you saw the poster that was behind Chris when he started. That poster is for me. I put it behind the kid. So when I'm talking to them, the kid is kind of all around the place and I'm trying to circle in on what's going on. I know when I look at the chain, I'm like, oh, the weakest link that we're talking about with the kid is their sound reasoning, or it's a framing issue or whatever, and it helps guide me in my conversations. So it has been on my door for many, many years and has been helping me become a better counselor for sure. And so I've always appreciated that. About 5 years ago, well, I don't know how long I've known, so you're gonna get to hear from Frank Cook, which is gonna be really fun for you. He's a volunteer. I met Frank, we were introduced by DEF, by Chris and his father, introduced us because Frank had moved into my area after retiring, and he wanted to work with high school students because he had been doing this work for many, many years in the corporate world. And so kind of a brainchild, if you ever get the pleasure of meeting Frank, was to create a class. And so we were able to work with students on college and career readiness. And that was really fun. Sadly, we have not been able to do it in the last couple of years just because of time and focus, but we were able to work with seniors, juniors, and sophomores. and really dive deep into helping them make some post-high school decisions around who they are, what's important to them, what their focus is. And it was really, really enjoyable. And it actually helped me clarify even better as a counselor, what are they really thinking? What are the things they need to do to really help clarify them as a person? As you know, high school is challenging, and it's so fun for me as a counselor because I get a kid from 9th grade to 12th grade. As you can imagine, that kid coming in at 9th grade and what they look like when they graduate across the stage. There's so much change. And so it helped us really dive deep into those questions that kids are facing. And like Carrie and Liz have talked about, socially, academically, and just in their personal lives. And so we developed a lot of curriculum, had a good time. The last class we taught were sophomores, which was really fun. And they are now seniors. So in the midst of my video conferencing world with kids, they are in this new challenge of picking their choices, which, as you can imagine, everyone's choices are kind of being upended in this pandemic. And there's financial issues, there's issues around health and safety, around should they leave. So I think the ability around flexibility and creative alternatives, it feels scarier to look at that, but actually the chain helps people realize that this is a possibility. And that was mentioned before around decision fitness. That is a real thing for kids right now. I think it's a real thing all the time, but certainly right now, kids are lonely. Kids are struggling for connection, and sometimes that may not be the easiest time for them to be thinking clearly. And so to help walk through that can be really, really important. And so I always appreciate the tools that have been given to me by DEF and through my work with people in the world of decision quality to help me work with them. I will tell a personal story. So my daughter, who is now 21, was one of our first groups that we got to teach in a class. She was a junior, and she was our second class, and that we taught. And she graduated in 2017, and she has just been a model because, well, partly because she's had to live it at my house, right? So it's been 10 years, poor thing, like since she was 11, she's heard it. But she also took the class, and she is now a college admissions director at Central Oregon Community College in Bend in Central Oregon. And she has started as an ambassador, and now she's actually hired, but she uses it with her students that are taking tours that she's helping guide. She's always helping them clarify values immediately, because one of her first questions she asks them is, what do you want to get out of college? What is your experience? Like, she's using the language as she works there. So we're very proud of how she's, Frank and I say we, it's really Frank and I, like when we taught her some of those things. So it's not only does she use it as her own life, she's she's doing this job and also finishing her degree, which is pretty amazing online. But she's using a creative alternative right there. But she's also really trying to pass it on to the next people she's working with to make sure COCC is the right fit for them. She doesn't want them to attend there if it's not right, but she's helping clarify their values, helping them decide creative alternatives, and all of that. So we're very proud of that. And the other students that we've worked with that are passing that on and using it in post-high school life and adult life, we hear back from them. So it is certainly something you can pass on to them as they go. And that's the fun part about being in high school, is you get to still connect with them as adults and see their great things. So I am going now, and if you want, you can ask me questions. I am definitely like the happy DEF, like I'll go praises and praises, but as you can tell, all of us will.
Next, we will move to the value DEF's work has created for administrators, where the tools of decision quality play an important role in helping educators work through complex decisions with increased effectiveness and collaboration. Here are a few clips from some incredible school leaders, starting with Nancy Golden, the former Chief Education Officer of Oregon and a longtime DEF supporter.
But once exploring it and once understanding it, I thought these are skills that leaders really need, that are exactly in the same skills that I needed. So it became really clear that as a superintendent, I could use these skills to help lead the school district I was responsible for leading. So for example, the school boards where a lot of hard decisions were made, either decisions about moving the district forward or decisions related to needing to make budget cuts or whatever the decisions were. It was really important that we made good decisions, and that's what Decision Education Foundation taught us. It certainly taught me, the school board, the staff, and it also was great for our students who we started having classes for on the decision making.
I want to say this is where we want to get to. This is the strategies. I mean, this is what we need to get our kids to. This particular system allows us to make good decisions to build that scaffolding and make sure it's solid. As a systems thinker, we know where we want to be. We build that foundation underneath it. And if we have our staff help us build that with good, sound decision making, then we don't have to sell it. Like I said, the ownership is there. Can you imagine having a common language of how to make good decisions, sound decisions that are not only just for the moment, but they're timeless? And that's how we can justify and use our resources better.
It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Andy Dye, Director of Secondary Instruction at the Eugene 4J School District. Andy is going to share his experience having received DEF training as a member of 4J's district administrative team and the value DEF tools have generated in working some of the key decisions the district has been facing during COVID.
Hi, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I did want to speak, not understate the importance of decision making for students, but it is equally beneficial for adults, especially fellow administrators who have gotten to a position of leadership because we have been making decisions. And I would like to say we've been successful in doing so, but lots of times we've been lucky. We make decisions often that are based on biases or impacts of advocacy, and the outcomes sometimes are good and sometimes are bad. When you get a bunch of us in a room, our flaws when making decisions are amplified. So we recognized as a district that we really didn't know how we made decisions. The most powerful voice in the room often had the final say, and we often found ourselves second guessing the quality of decisions or the process that we went through in the parking lot, so to speak. So we decided to get some training from DEF on how we would make decisions and try to change the culture of how decisions were made, realizing that we had been doing this with students for a number of years, but the adults had not taken the time to learn the same skills. So that was very helpful for us, even though we had some churn in our administrative ranks when it was time to make decisions around how we were going to respond to school closures due to the COVID pandemic. No one needs to be told how disruptive that is or how impactful that is, how absolutely every single part of our organization was affected in a potentially negative way by something over which we had very little control and very little prescience. We don't know how this is going to play out. We have to predict some things. We have to make some decisions on information that may be inadequate. And so we used this to form work groups. Chris mentioned earlier the snake model. And we used that model when working through all of the decisions that were a part of starting up this new school year. People were very nervous based on our experiences from the spring and knew that we did not want the same experience for our students and for our staff, but often found ourselves in these circular conversations where we began solving one problem and then realized hours later that we were actually talking about a very different problem. And so we formed work groups that were comprised of teachers and a decision-making group that was building administration, central office administration, and our labor association's leadership. And the agreement was that the teachers will be responsible and have the opportunity to develop all of the competing alternatives. And that we were going to choose amongst the most competitive alternatives for how we provided counseling services, how we structured our workday for students, how we structured the workday for teachers, how we made decisions about things that are normally decided through a contract negotiation process, which is not at all generally as collaborative as the decision-making process. In a negotiation, often labor and management have sides. In this situation, there was absolute transparency about what could be done, what should be done, what people wanted the outcomes to be, what they didn't, and truly what the problems were. Everything was out on the table. The process allowed us to frame our problems in a language that everyone converged upon. It allowed there to be this elimination of suspicion that there were resources or ulterior motives that one group or another did not know about. It allowed those who normally don't have a perspective on district-wide operations to see why some things would work and why some things wouldn't work when they appeared initially that they would or should. It wasn't a slow process, but it was deliberate. And in the end, we made what I believe were the best decisions. We didn't get them all right, but that doesn't mean it wasn't a good decision. The quality of the decision was that everyone knew why we pursued a certain angle and knew exactly how to judge the outcome in terms of, was that what we wanted or not? Where did we need to pivot given the information that we used throughout the decision-making process? In the end, I had conversations with union leadership in which they said that that was the most transparent and collaborative process that they had been a part of in their time with union leadership. I wish they were here, but couldn't make it today. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but they said that it was okay that I do so. They appreciated that. As we move into a time where we decide how we go into hybrid learning, that's absolutely what they want and what we want in terms of framing a process for making very complex decisions. We were all able to tell our constituents, the people that approach us, fellow administrators, fellow teachers, community members, why it is that we made decisions that we made, some of which on their surface were not popular at all, some of which did not match what other districts were doing. But in the end, our community understood why we made many of the decisions that we made. And it isn't as though everything went well, but what it did for us is to provide us a context in which to have productive, focused conversations and realize when we were falling into a trap or realize when we weren't fully engaged in the decision-making process and were instead advocating for something that we thought might be more popular with those to whom we answer. So certainly not trying to necessarily sell anything, but saying that in my professional experience that this has been the most helpful thing. And it allows me to let go of the myth of owning exclusively the right or responsibility to make a decision, and seeing that my responsibility is to ensure that the process is adhered to and that everybody understands their role and what our goal is as an institution. So thanks a lot. Happy to answer any questions or speak more, but I'll hand it over to Ed Mendelson, who's going to speak to you a bit.
Thank you, Andy. And thank you, Chris, for the invitation. It's great to be here. Really appreciate an opportunity to share my experience with DEF. And, I've used it in a lot of ways. And I use it as a parent. I've used it as a teacher. I've used it as an administrator. I'll focus in on my experience as an administrator when I was a principal at Thurston High School. And I think I met Chris back in 2005, 2006, when they were doing a training with the district that you saw Nancy talk about a little bit earlier. And, as a principal, you're making decisions all the time. Andy alluded to that as on a district level, but in running a high school, you're making decisions every day. And as a young administrator, I'm not sure that I knew exactly how I came to all those decisions other than some conviction that I thought I held. Racked with biases, I am sure. But as we embarked on trying a number of different initiatives in our school, a few times we needed to change schedules, and changing a schedule changes every facet of a everybody that works there, everybody that goes to school there, everything changes when that happens. And so you have a lot of different points of view as to what is important, and you have a lot of competing values and outcomes. And I think when we could use a process that helped us focus on what are the most important values, what are the most important outcomes, it gave us kind of a North Star by which we could begin then to evaluate our alternatives that we would come up with, that we would hash out. And I think that, and Amy could probably attest to this, that when we went through those times, that the staffs that we worked with, we did this on a number of different occasions, so there was different staffs as the years went on, almost a decade's worth. That transparency is really valuable. That transparency demystifies how decisions get made. You know that if you're in this, you've got a vocabulary to fall back on. You can say, well, you know, is that solution that we're proposing, does that get at our greatest likelihood of figuring out whether or not that's going to deliver the outcomes that we want? And depending on how those outcomes are prioritized, everything else can then be measured against that. So it's like when you're working with a student and you have a rubric and you have this criteria for success. This process kind of builds that into the system. And I think the words that come to mind when I think about using this with staffs is one, it's very deliberate. People can see the path that you're on and where you're going and how you're going to get there. I think it becomes a very collaborative process, right? You can't have creative alternatives unless you have different points of view in the room. It's impossible. And if we're all working on a shared set of values, then even the differences, it becomes us against the differences, not me against you. It's us about getting to that particular outcome that we want, not your idea versus my idea. And so, we found it very successful. I think, beyond being collaborative and deliberate, it was effective. We got there, and that was, always the most gratifying feeling, to get a staff working in a school that winds up walking away from a big, important decision and people are smiling. People are like, that worked. I didn't see that coming. I remember the first time we changed the schedule. We wanted to have a different schedule than our neighboring high school in our district. And the challenge was, well, if you can get 90% of your staff to agree on it, I guess we'd let you do it. And I think at the time when that challenge was issued, that was a pipe dream. You're not going to get 90% of anybody to agree on anything. And I had a number of teachers tell me that when we embarked on that process. And 92% of us decided, yeah, we should go to trimesters. That was back in the day. But anyhow, and I think that those decisions, because organizations have so many tough decisions to make, and because there are so many competing interests, doing it in the absence of a process is crazy. And there are too many traps and pitfalls that we're vulnerable to, not to have something that we can fall back on and something that is really effective. I've also had the chance to teach students these skills, and in a class that we offered over the summer. And what I find fascinating is, even if they're, whether they be 14 or 18, this vocabulary and this process is not difficult for students to wrap their head around. Probably the most satisfying use of this process has been with my own children, in trying to figure out things as their lives unfold ahead of them, and knowing how valuable it is to be able to make solid decisions, and being able to help them understand that, how this decision turns out isn't necessarily as important as the process that you're going to go through in order to make it. we're always hoping for our best, our most optimal outcome. But if you know why you made the decision, then after you've made it, your ability to commit to it is huge, right? I mean, having lived most of my adult life around high school students, commitment can be a tough thing. That notion of like, well, I thought I liked that. If we front load that and we say, hey, why don't you really think this through? Then when it becomes difficult, or then when it isn't quite going the way you were wishing it would go from the start, students are much more reluctant to throw in the towel. They'll hang in there. They'll work through it. They know why they're on that path. And so whether it be with kids or whether it be at an organizational level, I have found this to be, without question, the most useful professional development I've ever received in my 20 some odd years in education, both as a teacher and as an administrator. And on a personal level, probably made me a little bit of a smarter dad. And we can always use help there. So that's been my experience with it. I'm always been, I think, in a debt of gratitude to Chris and to his dad, Carl, for introducing me to this and making it really an effective part of my life. And so now I think I'm getting the high sign. It's time for me to turn over the mic to a man who needs no introduction, Mr. Frank Cook.
Okay, thanks, Ed. And yeah, I'm here at the anchor position, and Chris just basically said, well, fill in the gaps with everything that people missed, and they've done a great job of covering it. So let me give you a little background. I graduated from high school in 1970 and left and said, okay, well, I'm done with that part of my life. So it's ironic that in my 60s, I'm actually back in high school again. I spent 31 years at Chevron, and in 1989 was introduced to the decision chain and the processes, and basically changed my career from geology over to decision making and decision quality, and spent the rest of my life at Chevron helping the leadership of the company improve their decision making skills, and used it a great deal in my business life, and again also in my personal life. And just a quick example of how it helped personal life. We've talked about some of the decisions our kids made, and our daughter, who it's her 37th birthday today. Happy birthday, Kate. A few years ago, had a decision to make. She was between jobs and was trying to decide if she should take a new job as basically a chief operating officer of a clinic, or if she should go to law school. It's a very difficult decision. Both looked promising, and she was struggling. It's often hard. I mean, when you have a good alternative, a bad alternative, decision making is pretty easy. Get rid of the dumb one and take the good one. But when you got two good alternatives, it can paralyze you. And she was paralyzed, and she spent a lot of time worrying about it. And she talked extensively to her mother. She talked to her teachers, her brother, her friends, random people on the street. And finally, she says, I guess I have to talk to Dad. And so we sat down and said, okay, so we're going to sit down and talk about this. And she said, well, I have these two choices. I could get my job, or I can go to law school. I said, why do you have to decide? I said, can you do both? I said, can you take the job and try out the job for a couple of years? And if you then decide you really don't like the job, go to law school. It turns out that most law schools will give people a couple of years to actually commit to coming. And so the miracle decision was, I said, you don't have to decide. I said, you can do both. And so that was very helpful. And she's even come back to me a few times subsequently with other decisions when she's really desperate. But after leaving Chevron and moving from Houston to beautiful Eugene, Chris mentioned this opportunity to work at Thurston High School. And so that's when I said, well, I'm going to go back to high school, and discovered very quickly that working with high school students is far more fun and productive than working with the senior executives that I had been working with at Chevron and then through a little bit of a consulting career. High school kids are fun. They're receptive to learning. They want to try things new. CEOs, not so much. CEOs already believe they know everything. And so I have to spend most of my time helping them unlearn bad habits rather than teaching them. And the kids, they're a little bit more of a blank slate, and they really need to improve their decision-making skills. As a volunteer, I tell them that I can be honest and I'm not paid to be here, so the administration has no influence over me. And I said, decision-making skills is probably the only thing you'll learn in high school that you'll actually use in the future. Amy can vouch for that. But let me just share one story of one student in this college and career class that Amy alluded to, that we taught for a few years. And I can't remember his name. I'm sure Amy can. He was torn between attending college. He wanted to attend college, but he also was interested in going into the military. He wanted to go into the Air Force, and he was interested in aviation mechanics and in particular helicopters. And so again, this decision, what should I do? What should I do? I'm really torn. And we said, well, let's get some more useful information. Let's think and really understand what your choices are. And he started to explore. And that was part of what people did in the classroom. It wasn't just Amy and I'm lecturing, but they would spend classroom time actually researching their options. And he discovered a couple things. He says, oh, wait, actually the Army flies more helicopters than the Air Force. And at the college, there's an Army ROTC program that I could enter into. And so again, like with my daughter, sometimes the best decision is you don't have to decide, do both. You say, okay, so you can have your military career, you can learn the skills you want, and you can also get your college degree at the same time. And that gave him the clarity. All of a sudden, it just lifted that burden. He's, oh, wait, I can do both. And that clarity that Ben talked about early in the video, it's remarkable when it happens, because all of a sudden they go, oh, that was easy in retrospect. And one of the big things for students, and we found this, is it gives them a sense of power. A lot of these kids, a lot of these high school kids are like little corks floating down the rapids of the Mackenzie River or the Willamette River here in Eugene, Springfield, and they're out of control of their life, and they're bobbing and they're hitting the rocks, and the decision quality gives them the sense to say, okay, you can't control everything, but there are some decisions you can make, and there are some things that you can take control of. We've had a number of students come back and say one of the things they love about our class is that indeed they can win arguments with their parents. You know, they say, I really want to do this, and the parent says, well, no, I don't really think you should. And they go into this argument and pull out the chain, and pretty soon the parent ends up saying, well, that's not what I would have picked, but I guess it's okay. And the kids come back delighted. They say, oh, wait a minute, this is powerful. I can influence my parents. I can get my way. And that's very motivating to these kids. And so it's great fun. DEF gives them all these wonderful tools, and you've heard the story. But the final aspect for me is it's fun for me. It's just fun to get back and help these kids who someday are going to be voting and paying taxes and everything while I'm even older in my old age. And I really want them to make good decisions.
With that, we will end today's Decision Education Foundation event. Thank you to all our speakers and you, the participants, for attending this outstanding event and being with us today. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we hope to see you again soon in another DEF event. Thank you.